Welcome back to the Chattanooga Film Festival. I'm Dustin Kramer, Senior Features Programmer, joined by Chris Dortch, our Festival Director, and we are beyond thrilled to present a very special screening of David Ullman and Matt Jackson's shot on VHS adaptation of The Crow comic book by James O'Barr, along with the making of doc Inertia, remaking The Crow. These films stand as a testament to what passion and creativity can produce, regardless of the age or experience of the artist. And I'm so honored and delighted to welcome the absolute madmen behind this incredible lo-fi punk rock masterpiece, David Ullman and Matt Jackson. Welcome, gentlemen, and thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you. That's what a treat.
Wow, thank you.
So the thing that jumps out to me at first blush watching this, the first time I saw this, and I even just rewatched it today before this, is how well suited the format, the VHS format, is to this story. So was that, I have to imagine that it was probably a choice that you made because it's the camera that you had, and that's kind of how, you know, art from adversity and all that kind of stuff. But did you ever, like, was there ever a conversation about maybe getting an old 8mm camera and trying to do this on film, or was it just always going to be a VHS project?
It was, that we grew up shooting movies on VHS because that was what, you know, our parents had. And so that was just, we were already doing that. And I think we just kind of continued on, and we're literally, 14 years old when we started. So that was what we had at our disposal. And we just kind of got to it within a month of seeing the big screen adaptation.
Yeah, it's just like, I think my parents didn't have movies on 8mm film, and I don't think yours did too. So I didn't have any experience with that. We weren't actually like film school buffs at the time. It was not like we thought, oh, this would be cool to use an old thing. It was just, that's what we had. And so we just, like Dave said, we just continued with it. Yeah, it wasn't really a thought.
You mentioned that you saw the film for the first time when you were 14. For me, not to date myself here, but The Crow was one of the first R-rated movies I was allowed to see solo in the theater. So it's a big one for me. Like, this is the era where if your parents just signed the back of your ticket that they didn't give a fuck, you could go in. And I'm curious if you could talk a little about that first, seeing it and just being so struck by it that you felt like you had to, play a cover song, so to speak.
Oh, that's so funny, because I did that a lot as a musician, and
same, very much same.
But yeah, that practice started earlier when I was like 7 or 8, making cover movies of like La Bamba.
Oh my God, that's amazing!
That too? Holy shit!
We'll be playing that next year.
Those are less beloved, but on the internet somewhere if you're really curious.
We are. Yeah.
We went to see the movie. I remember it so clearly because actually it was 31 years ago today, Friday, May 13th, right? I'm sorry, tomorrow. Tomorrow,
when we're speaking. Timing. I love that.
Yeah, Friday, May 13th. We were a fan of like action movies, especially like my jam was Jean-Claude Van Damme and Bruce Lee, and of course Brandon Lee. And I was aware that this was his final film, and excited to see it. And I remember my dad drove us. I can't remember who all was there. It was definitely Matt and me. And we went to a neighboring town to try to see the 7:00 show, but it was sold out. We couldn't get in. And that, I don't remember ever encountering that in the small town area we were from in Northeast Ohio. And so we actually then drove. It was probably an hour. It took majority of the time the film would have been screening, like from 7 to whatever. We drove to the 9 p.m. show. Matt, you probably remember, like, so it was between Fairlawn and then over to Worcester, to give you a sense of and we did get a ticket for the 9 whatever show there. And it was also about to be sold out, and people were sitting in the aisles, and I'd never seen anything like this. Like, people, I remember, because it was, a guy had his face painted, but it was only like half painted, like the character makeup. And the movie was louder than I'd ever heard any movie played at. And it was like, the first time I'm sure I ever smelled weed, even though I didn't know what it was. And it was like being at a rock concert. It was like crazy, the energy and the shouting of the people in the room. And And at the end of the movie, some dude in the front row stood up and he's like, "This movie sucked. The comic book is better." He had a comic book t-shirt on. He's like, "You can get it at my comic shop."
Of course. Yeah.
And I don't think we went to that comic shop, but we did go to one in the next few days and got, the graphic novel. And I read it in one sitting. Like, I stayed up too late, and it kind of scared the shit out of me too. Like, it's a very singular work.
It's intense. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But I think it was ultimately Matt's offhanded comment that got us to undertake the adaptation. Do you remember anything about that?
The comment?
Or just being the one to instigate this thing that would then never die.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely, I'm happy you agree. It wasn't from watching the film that we had the idea, right? It was from reading the comic book. Is that correct? Talk in the history that we then saw after looking at the comic book.
I think so. Yeah, I remember because we were like, we played soccer, like club soccer. And so we were like kicking the soccer ball around, I think, in my front yard, which is a very common everyday occurrence for us back then. And my memory sort of secondhand through like the interviews in the documentary was then Matt said like, we should do a version of this Crow movie. And we started pretty soon thereafter, like went to a comic we took over our friend's paper route for like a weekend and got a little bit of spending money then that we took to a costume shop. And we got like a long-haired black wig and a little bottle of fake blood we thought would last us the whole thing, and proceeded to like try to film the panels of the comic book. But for the first, I don't know, 3-4 months, it was horrendous, the results. Like, I don't think they were very encouraging to even us. Like, we were not pulling it off.
So that I guess that is one thing that I did want to ask was, did you treat the comic book as a sort of storyboard, kind of like Sin City, proto Sin City type thing?
Yeah.
And I guess it sounds like you kind of did. And after that, were you more like, did you feel freer to kind of break out of that or something?
It was really a storyboard, right? Yeah. And then you're bringing in, as a character, you were obviously very inspired by the Brandon Lee role. And so
the performance,
the visuals of the book as like, this is the feel of the film, but then as if that they bringing the inspiration of Brandon Lee, and then it sort of became mixed in that way, right? Is that sort of how you feel it?
Yeah. I think a lot of it.
How can we bring this to visual life? Yeah.
Yeah, I think we were so excited about the film and the contemporary nature of that. There hadn't been a movie of that flavor. That I remember shooting a lot of stuff directly imitating the film, like the stuff with the Sarah character. We sort of and then the Hangman's Joke band, we were doing that. Like, I hand painted a Hangman's Joke t-shirt and all this kind of stuff. And that was among the early footage that really was not very effective. And it was not anything new either. It wasn't us taking scenes from the comic. It was just aping scenes from the movie. Oddly enough, there is a scene from our first like 20-minute tape at the very end of the adaptation, as it still exists, where Eric returns to the grave. That is actually from that first section. So we were doing it a little bit, but there was a hell of a lot more from the movie, just stealing stuff from the movie and redoing it. And I think as we got better at it, we started to also try to do something original in scare quotes, because it was we were doing the best we could to like Sin City it before Sin City was a thing. But Matt really, like, because I was the main character, he held the camera most often, and I think could probably speak most to that approach of the comic book.
Do you remember what kind of camera you used? Just for the tech heads out there, do you remember what it was?
Oh, it was a Panasonic VHC palm quarter that when I did the intros for the virtual program, I do hold up to the camera.
Okay.
The actual camcorder. Oh my God.
I still have it. It's got like a VHS-C tape still stuck in it from 1990.
Stuck in it. That's great.
I can't get it out.
As they are wont to do.
Yeah.
So so the comic book is in black and white. Did you shoot in black and white? Did you desaturate in post? Was that a creative choice that you made later, or was it always going to be black and white? And then also, it's been a while since I've seen the comic. Are the flashbacks in the comic in color, or was that an Ullman Jackson original idea there?
Well, I don't think we we didn't have any easy means of making it black and white. I can't remember the first time, say, that we just started turning down the color on the TV and realizing like, oh, this looks way better. So we didn't have the opportunity with the type of camera to just like flick a button and have that be the case. I do remember, I mean, I still to this day know an absurd amount of information about the making of that film. And I remember reading somewhere once that in an ideal situation, they would have shot that movie in black and white with color flashbacks. And indeed, you see it now, there's such bright, vibrant colors in the flashbacks and a lot desaturated sort of present day. And so they didn't do it for commercial reasons, but of course that was nothing. I don't know who we thought would ever see this anyway, but so we just did what we wanted.
It's great. It's like it's in such the spirit of the comic. Of course, the comic being in black and white, and this idea that like after the murders, Eric's world is sort of drained of color, so to speak. Like it's, I think it works really well. Matt, I'm sorry I stepped on you. What were you going to say?
No, but your question was you couldn't remember about the comic book. Are the flashbacks in the comic book? They are in color. That's correct, right, Dave?
Oh no, they're it's all in black and white. There's some color paintings, that would be for the cover or various art renderings. A lot of them are in this kind of softer palette, almost like a dreamy, not watercolor, but they have a different character to them for sure.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. I think it works so well for your movie, and yeah, just thematically, like that subtext there is potent stuff. I love that. I am interested in how you put this thing together. So in the documentary, there's footage of you editing on an old linear editing machine at the public access station where you got to punch the numbers and turn the dial and all that stuff.
And by the way, that there are literal paper routes and public access stations in this story just endears us to it all the more.
It's an entire vibe.
Just need
Absolutely.
you to know that. So,
thanks.
Were you able to use that system for all of your projects that you were making back then, or did you ever have to do like what the rest of us had to do and just tie two VCRs together and do it that way?
No, so much tie-in of two VCRs together.
Right on.
Yeah, it was mostly that. I mean, it went on for so long though. So I mean, it gets a little confusing to get into, but Matt and I worked on it for a year starting in June 1994, and then by June 1995 we had finished shooting as best we could the comic book, and got a little, it was like an equalizer or something from the local video store that did allow to take the color out. And then just put it together between two VCRs in my bedroom. And then we even took pre-orders for the cost of the tape and delivered them to the people that ordered them in our high school on Halloween 1995.
Amazing.
And we thought we were
That's
done.
Incredible.
Yeah.
How did you advertise that to your fellow students? Was there an ad in the back of the student newspaper? Or I'm curious how you spread the word about the pre-orders. Yeah.
He's we had red, right? Letter size. Yep. Posters. I think we still have
incredible. The flyer system.
Around,
love it.
Around the high school.
Yeah. And our very small town that we're from, 6,000 people, and there were less than 300 people in the entire school, all 4 grades. So, and 30 of them were in the thing at one point in time. Even by that point, so many people had been they'd shot a roll and we recast it because we were forever refilming things once. Because a lot of it was edited in camera. That was what we'd been doing for our previous movies a lot, because that was kind of your best bet of not getting the dreaded snowy glitch, between the shots, or you'd get that kind of rainbow thing. And so I got pretty good at. There was a point in time, maybe 3 years into the project, where you had to have a flying erase head. That was the kind of thing that wouldn't create the snowy space between shots when you're putting it together later. So I got to where I could listen to, I'd step one frame back at a time and I would count. I think it was 32 was the magic number I remember. So if I went back 32 frames on the play deck and I hit play button, and I would listen to the motor, and then it had hit pause on record on the other. I got pretty good at getting into 1/30th of a frame.
And you had to do that for every cut?
Oh yeah, and
Holy
unfortunately, even once I had the money, because I was working in a video store, because of course that's what you did in the 90s if you were a geek.
We all did. I think everyone here. So
let's put all my money to where buying the best VHS or SVHS decks I could at home. But I could get that accurate, but it would still say like play up in the corner of the video, and that was not something I could in the dub. I couldn't account for that because that wasn't the same amount of time each time. I couldn't figure out a system of like, if I just go back this far, then I wouldn't have to play. And you can't have it say like play every other shot. Yeah. So eventually I was like, I need to find someplace better to do this than just my bedroom on 2 old VCRs. And that's when I found the Cable Access Center that allowed me to work on the edit there. And then eventually I would work there once I graduated high school, and yeah, use that machine to edit all kinds of stuff.
Didn't they air it? They aired it.
You would have to, yeah. So
what did the version
that use the facility? Yeah.
What did the version that aired look like? I can't imagine you got to air the uncensored full cut.
It was, yeah. And
it was the Wild West of public access, sir. You can get away with so many things.
Hell yeah, man. That's great.
There's definitely a mention at a town meeting of like of it.
That actually, I do want to get into like the reaction to this thing from I guess everybody involved, and then the authority figures, I guess, who I get that at that time were the sort of the people who maybe could have put the kibosh on this thing at any point. Like your parents you touch on it a bit in the documentary. Were they pretty supportive of this? Was there any moment in which it was like, oh, they're pissed and this might just have to stop altogether? Like, tell me about
PTA are outside with pitchforks and torches, that sort of a thing. Yeah.
Matt, you take this one to start.
Yeah, and I don't know. I can assume my dad was running out of patience, right? But he also didn't know as much about your dad. So remind me of some of the stories about him, or probably just in my basement, right? In the basement of the old house, making that a mess, painting on the doors. Yeah. Things like that. So Dave's dad was really, I think, more helpful because I think he thought it was fun because he was the one supporting Dave since he was 7, doing all the La Bamba things and helping Dave become a musician and things like that. So I think Dave's dad was really interested in the technical element and the fact we're doing something. And all my dad knew was that and Dave literally lived down the hill from me. I mean, this is really like small town America. At its finest. So I would just tell my dad, okay, I'm going to Dave's down the hill, and then come back up to blood in the middle of the night, reeking of beer at 14 or something like that. So I think because he was a calm, passive man, he was calmly, passively losing his patience at many times, but just sort of let it happen. Yeah, I mean, I guess at that age, I
found out.
Sort of built them up. You know, like I said, this wasn't, and unfortunately, I'm a bit too worried. Dave keeps talking about the previous films before this. You guys are gonna start digging around looking for those. So I think we need
those are not available.
You have like client attorney privilege with us, where we will not put anything out that you have not rubber stamped. We promise.
So there's no forthcoming box set. That's a shame.
We had the prequels of things like that. So no, but they do exist. We did do things before this that I think were slowly building their awareness that we were busy with films, and they were not just cute little cartoons out in the driveway. They were slowly becoming action films and pretending to be adults. And then it's just, and then suddenly it became The Crow. But by then we were 14, 15, and I guess cat was out of the bag. But
what about the parents of the other kids that were in the movie? Did they ever see it? Did they have words for you?
We had a lot of trouble getting people to show up to film with us, but I don't think it had so much to do with people's parents not wanting them to. But I guess I could never know. But
you gotta get your mom to drive you to the set, you know. So it's like you know, after soccer practice, you show up.
Exactly. Yeah.
How did we do this? We had no car. Your dad was just driving us around, right?
No, I mean, I think
bikes.
I think those group scenes especially were often really tough, and we got there even in that very first year. about midway through in the fall. Like that was one thing I remember more clearly, where the end of the comic like has this really big gathering of like, you know, at this point all of the T-Bird and Tintin, all those guys, they'd all been like besieged by this mystery man, and so they're gathering like all of their foot soldiers and so like Eric confronts just dozens of these gang members at the end of the comic, and we were going to do this as best we could, and we'd done all this planning, and we gave out these flyers trying to get as many of the. I was a student trainer for the football team at the time.
Oh wow!
And that helped like have access to like, you know, the bigger, burlier guys. And,
so that also explains like why you were so shredded, because I gotta say, like, your physicality, not only your physicality, but with the makeup on, you look just like Brandon Lee. Like, it's really close. It's crazy how close you look to him in some of these shots.
Oh, well, I was trying. I definitely know that. But yeah, that people didn't show up for that 30. Like we had invited at least 30 people. All 30 people were like, yeah, totally, man, we'll be there. And one person of those 30 people showed up. And so we literally like quit, and we thought we were going to be done. And then eventually we kind of started up again after that. And even then after what I call that first version, just kept rolling and rolling. But in recent years, I have talked to my dad about it, and he was telling me, like just in the last like 2 or 3 years, how like our neighbors were giving him grief that he never told me about. Like, because you figure the thing opens with me pushing my way out of a grave, but we dug like a grave on the side of my house right next to the neighbor's house, but it was difficult to do that, so we didn't dig like I'm not even 6 foot, so we didn't dig like a 5'9" grave. You know, we dug like a little grave that I could fold up my legs that was like the size of a child, and so
nothing to see here, neighbors.
Yeah, and so that my dad definitely fielded some questions from neighbors and stuff.
Child grave was not on my bingo card for this talk, just so we're aware.
Child grave, yeah.
Oh, it was on mine. Weirdly, I don't know what that says about me. Yeah, so.
You mentioned the police got called on you a few times. Are there any harrowing run-in with cops that any stories that stand out to you in particular that you'd like to recount?
None stick out to me, other than it just didn't seem to matter whether or not we called in like ahead of time and said, you know, we have permission to be at this place or whatever. The cops seemed like they would always come, and you know, I never thought about it then, because it was all just like white people in our town. There was like almost no people of color. And so nowadays, all I can think is that how wild it is that like these kids are running around with, because the fake guns look very real. And I just think there was a lot of privilege involved in that I wouldn't have realized at the time. But because we lived where we lived, and it was such a small community, I guess, and we never really had, I mean, we always got reprimanded, but I feel like they never even ultimately like prevented us from finishing whatever scene we were doing. You know?
Hey, I mean, we had a lot of freedom. I think we really were lucky where we were. There was such a small town. It was quite middle class. Everyone just sort of knew each other. There was not anything going on to be worried of in the beginning with crime and stuff like that. And so I think there was a lot of freedom. You know, I was asked once about the same day, a couple of years before we did the film, I was asked by the principal of our high school to paint like I don't know how long, an enormous banner that would go over our street for like a festival we had every year where you walk down the street. And so I hand painted this banner, and of course I couldn't do that in my house. And so the principal just gave me the front keys to the high school, and I could just
amazing
whenever I wanted to, all summer long, and I would paint on the stage, because they trusted me because our dads were in the same Lions Club and things like that.
And how did you abuse this power?
I was in every classroom of that high school snooping around. I didn't steal anything, but I used the trust to the limit. But that's how close it was. Everyone just knew us. Everyone thought, okay, let them do what they want to do. That's going to be fine. But I think we're very lucky and fortunate for that. Yeah. Otherwise, this wouldn't. There's a lot of elements that could have gone wrong, and this would have been stopped, I think, at a much earlier time.
Did you get have you guys gotten any kind of like cease and desists or anything, or legal troubles because of this?
Yes.
All right, let's hear it.
That's in the documentary, right?
No, because I think when the documentary stuff happened, that hadn't come about yet. So I mentioned the high school version, as we called it, and that was much more tame, and it had more of that mix between the comic and the theatrical film. But so I think we finished that when I was 16, 1995. And so now I was just getting to be able to drive, and then I saw like Desperado, which led me to El Mariachi, and I started to get this idea of like all of these ways that I could make a more sophisticated action film. And I just applied it all to The Crow, and so it was like, let's just get back to this and augment the things that were good and try to make it more like the comic, which meant making it much more, mature and all this. And by the time I finished that, it was 1998. The internet was kind of young. I had found some Crow fan sites because I was trying to figure out what actually happens at the end of the book. Like I mentioned that our version of that scene where Eric returns to the grave after all the murders and everything, it's pretty ambiguous. I would come to find out through these fan sites, though, is that because his mission was done or whatever, that Eric literally just like takes the gun he's been killing all these men with and kills himself. But at that point, he was no longer, refusing death, as it were. Anyway, I learned this from Crow fan sites. And so I wrote to these like fan sites, maybe half a dozen or more existed, as well as all the people we went to high school with these like postcards that says, hey, we finished this. If you'd like it. I figured out like a cost for like the clamshell case and the Kinko's color copy and all this kind of stuff. And so I got 160-minute tapes and dispersed them this way. And I was getting just messages to my AOL account or whatever. But in right around 99 or 2000, like the documentary, we sat for those long interviews, and I had this idea that we could set up a website and kind of same thing, just sell it for cost of the materials, but that we wouldn't so we'd do like behind the scenes footage, or not footage because early internet. Anyway, this kind of higher profile thing led to some communication with the people that, because I was also reaching out to the bands, trying to get permission to use their music. Anyway, eventually we did get in touch with the people that own the film rights, and I was like, oh, cool, They're like, what's your address?
This is going to go our way.
Hey, what's your address? We'll send you a check.
We'll send you a certified mail saying you have to stop all of this.
Oh, my God.
So that happened, and so the website was built but never launched in 2000, and then made this like half-hour making of thing from the documentary footage, most of which, so much of that documentary footage was Matt rolling the camera. But anyway, so we just stopped everything. And then off and on for the years that followed, I was starting to hear about fan films, like Star Wars fan films, and there was like websites. And so I would re-engage the film, the Pressman people and all this. And it actually came pretty close. We had rescored the music to the soundtrack from the comic book, a group called Trust Obey was a collaboration between the author and John Bergen, an artist and writer and musician. So John Bergen had given us permission to use his music, so it cleared out all the copyrighted music, and I was kind of working back and forth with trying to get this like fan film thing site going, and then it just kind of petered out. And by that point, I was in like starting to approach my mid-20s. I got like married young and divorced soon after, and embarked on like a solo music career. And I thought all of this was behind me until a few years ago, where it all kind of came up again. And since then, there's been no trouble. I anticipate it every day. I'm just
well, you brought it up in passing, but I'm curious also, obviously the soundtrack equally so for a lot of us was a huge iconic thing. Were you using the same needle drops from the film and reaching out to the bands, or how are you approaching the soundtracking of this? Because again, that soundtrack is like truly one of the most iconic of its era.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No. Yeah. I mean, the whole Crow movie and comic was like a cultural passport for me at that age to all things awesome, so definitely from the soundtrack to the film, I became aware of and then obsessed with Nine Inch Nails, and
very much same. That Joy Division cover is an all-timer. So
yeah. Oh yeah. And then speaking of Joy Division, so by the time, I think even that first version in 1995, what we tried to do is so many of the chapters and or scenes in the comic are named after Joy Division songs, or there would be like a full page of Cure lyrics
Sure.
And then in the intro and outro and afterward, there were mentions of other bands. And so as we were trying to get closer to the comic and not just regurgitate the big screen film, I thought it would be cool to use, needle drops that were either implied in the text or otherwise. So we didn't, none of the actual like music from the soundtrack. But like our first version didn't have Nine Inch Nails' Dead Souls. It had Joy Division's Dead Souls. And so even the version that exists now, I kind of reverted back to I guess the needle drops of the bands that were mentioned in the comic. And we did initially though use the score music in that first 1998 version had all the Graham Revell music and.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever get word from
one interesting thing about the soundtrack? There's very little that I'm like, I got to be sure to mention this, but I do think it's very interesting about the soundtrack is that when I stripped the Graham Revell music out and we were all Trust Obey, we used like all of the heavy metal music and stuff like that initially. Just the whole thing was Trust Obey music, and there's a handful of instrumentals on that album, and all of that's streaming now, I believe. So I'd encourage folks to check that out. But there's one ballad on that, and it's called Sleeping Angel. And there's, of course, a lot of sort of romantic or melancholy scenes in the comic and in our adaptation thereof, and no heavy metal music was going to work for that. But by this point, so all of the visuals kind of got locked in around 1998, but the soundtrack would kind of change as we were trying to get permission to share this online. I needed some kind of romantic theme. At this point, I was in my early 20s, but my brother was around about 17, 18 and become a really gifted musician. He was, he had a rock band that was getting like interest from Sony and all this. And so he did a teenage adaptation or cover of the Sleeping Angel song on keyboard that was all kinds of like layers. And he's a really great engineer as well. And so that thing became all of the non-heavy metal music in the movie really effectively, I think. Even to this day, I listen to it. I was like, wow.
It's fantastic.
Agreed. Absolutely.
It is fantastic.
Another just like, 17-year-old kid doing that. Yeah. Same kid that gets stabbed in the Tom-Tom scene. All my siblings are in it.
So James O'Barr, has he seen this? Have you heard?
I believe so, yeah. I have various reasons to believe so over the years. One of the more notable anecdotes around that was I was working at that video store in 1999 or so. I think so. I had that initial run of like 160-minute tapes, and some of them were like the tracking was all getting off, like the video heads were dirty, and they were not very good copies of an already not very easy to see film because it was so dark and all this. So I kind of just wanted to like send these off. So I remember writing to the back of a few horror magazines, and one of those led to a guy calling me when I worked at the video store. I pick up the phone, I'm like, Hometown Video, as you do.
Amazing.
That's the actual name of the video store, by the way.
Of course.
Mine was Videos to Go, and we had tanning beds in the back, and we would draw straws. So
nice.
yeah.
DJ's video here.
Properly. Sorry, everyone who visited them. Never cleaned properly. Yeah. So.
Oh yeah. So there was a guy that called. I answered that, and he just starts giving me this address. Or no, it was a phone number, and he's like, "You know what I'm giving you?" And I was like, Hometown Video. He says, no, this is James O'Barr's home phone number. And he then explained who he was, and he got the video through the magazine, and he's like, call this number, you'll hear a female's voice and all that, and leave a message saying how you got it. And so I did, and ultimately got an address in Michigan where he was living at the time, and sent off a tape and a letter, I'm sure. So I believe he would have seen it then. I remember in the early days of like video on the internet, watching an interview with him when he was talking about, he's like, there's some kids in Ohio that spent 2 years making it. And I was both excited, but I was also like, bro, it was 4 years.
4 fucking years.
My mind. Get the facts right.
Come on.
This is our lives, man.
So there's stuff like that. And then in 2014, I live in Minnesota these days, and I saw that James O'Barr was going to be at a comic book convention. So I went there just to meet him. And when I did meet him, I was like, I had some old tapes left or something, like a documentary, maybe a press kit. And I was like, and to give you some artifacts from the 90s. And he kind of looked at me, he's like, are you David? and so it was a really nice moment, and
that's amazing.
That's a bow.
So I never watched it like with him or
thing,
anything, but I believe he's seen it.
Not yet.
Yeah. He's always been cool about it. He never gave us any grief, and actually back in the day, Kitchen Sink, who published the graphic novel, when we were still working on it, I sent them rough scenes or whatever, and they sent me back a handwritten note that got me out of a little hot water when I turned in the project for an extra credit in English class. My English professor marched the comic over and my tape and slammed it down on my desk. She goes, "What do you know about plagiarism?" Like,
oh, come on.
I have permission, I swear. And so anyway, but yeah, it's a really dicey issue, of course. You know, it's somebody else's intellectual property, as they say. So people have been by and large, very generous with us over the years.
Was anything else that you guys produced around this time? Was it as involved as this, or was this kind of the magnum opus, so to speak, of that era of young filmmaking?
This is it. It's right. I mean, Illusions is pretty awesome, Dave. Illusions is really almost there, but this...
You gotta tell what Illusions is.
Yeah. Now I want to know.
I believe you're referring to Illusions of official CFF 2026 selection.
20, yes, for next year.
We're talking about. Yeah.
We'll pair it up with La Bamba.
Your slot's fine. Yeah.
This was it. It was really a very quick curve. It was like playing around with films, and then boom, we jumped up to this, and then it stayed there for 4 years while he kept editing. And then for 30 years we've done other stuff, but there's nothing, right, Dave? There's nothing else that's like, no. You see the Crow, you'll like this.
Oh gosh, no. I mean, I guess what I could say, not from that time, well, sort of, yeah, because the Crow project led me to the Cable Access Center. By the time, so I didn't go to college right out of high school. I spent like a year. I was doing important stuff, like making this movie that had no outlet, working at a video store, and ultimately the Cable Access Center. But that was such a great job because it was a very bustling place, and a lot of the work I would do on the movie would be like overnight. That before I was working there, I'd come in before they closed and all this. But so working at the Cable Access Center and the video store was like, I'm a friend of mine. So people like my friends would kind of come there and make shows because anybody could make programming. Or you could use the facilities for anything you wanted within. I don't even know if I was going to say within reason, but I don't even know. You just had to air something, you know? So I would spend a lot of my time working there of like people doing religious shows or whatever, and anything that people were excited about. But I could also make my own programming, or my friends could make programming. And so it became a kind of a gathering place for us that around the time I was still, especially working on the documentary, that became a kind of the focus because it was so difficult to make this, fictional piece, like to get people to show up and all of that kind of stuff. Whereas I fell sort of backward into this, what I now know to be called personal documentaries, where you're kind of a character in the thing. Because of all the work that Matt was doing with the behind the scenes footage, we had this other story that could be told. And it was so compelling because it was, it was real life and all this. And so I ended up doing a lot more of that. To this day, I'm actually 10 years into working on something that has its origins basically after The Crow, kind of this other thing, and my experiences with music and the independent music business, but also like how music connects me to my family and friends. But it's a lot of that same footage. And Matt and I were in a band together that practiced at the Cable Access Center. And so, yeah, we did a lot of stuff, but nothing that like found an audience like this. Because this, there's this built-in audience of people who love that book. And, I'm right there with them and deeply, I don't know, honored to be included in some small way in discussions about that book.
So that's what you're working on these days. I think our crowd would be interested to know what you guys do now and, what kind of creative outlets that you're pursuing now. I assume that Matt is a professional Peter Lorre impersonator based on the little snippet of an impression we get in the documentary, which is fantastic. But I would like to know...
There's still time for a Mad Love remake. Absolutely.
Don't threaten me with a good time.
I threatened you with a good time, sir. I need this in my life.
Oh my God. I want Matt to share what he's up to these days, but one of the things that I do for fun is guest host on a podcast called the Borgo Pass podcast that nurtures one of my other great loves, which is the classic monster films of that era. And my very first home movies before Matt and I even knew each other were me and my brother remaking Frankenstein. This was a thing that would happen. I would shoot something once. So Frankenstein. Made 2 versions of Frankenstein, 2 versions of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, 2 versions of La Bamba.
Wow.
1,000 versions of The Crow. But I would make something like in a day. It didn't come out so well, so I'd like tackle it again. But that is one of my great loves, is the Universal monster films. And so
very much same. Yeah.
Mad love. Holy crap. Anyway, Matt, tell them what you do these days. Tell them what's over your shoulder. I don't know if they can tell. That's
this
a crow.
Shoulder? It's a crow. This is stuff.
That's so sick. I didn't even notice that.
There he is. What do I do these days? Well, I mean, funny enough, was probably quite inspired by our time making films together. But soon after high school, I ended up going to school to study special effects for films.
Incredible.
And did a whole 3-year program for that and learned all the techniques. And I left school with the techniques, but I was then directed more towards the East Coast to New York and not LA. And so I didn't work in films very much. I've done some interesting small films and stuff. But since then, I then actually have been more focused in theater. So I've been a puppet maker and mask maker for theaters and films for the last 25 years almost.
Wow.
And that's kept me very busy. And so, for instance, funny enough, I have this crow because in the city I live in here in the Netherlands, there was a dance company who needed 11 crows for a performance. And I was fortunately smart enough at the time and said, I could have made them from scratch, but in the end, I went online and found an old guy who was stuffing dead crows that he was finding on the streets. And so I got 11 taxidermied crows. So it's a full-time puppet maker and mask maker for 20 years. And in recent years, I've sort of gone, funny enough, before our experience making films, actually both Dave and I were just visual artists doing lots of drawing. So we really started off at our years of 10-year-old of just drawing. And then that became moving images with the film. And I've sort of gone back that route and do a little bit less with the puppet work. And now I'm sort of experiencing more as being a fine artist again. And so now I got an exhibition coming up in my city here in September. And so I'm in my studio. I do a lot of old-fashioned work now, like just wood carving. So with my movie experience, I learned all the techniques of silicone and fiberglass resin and all these like toxic stuff, and to make really super hyper realistic work. But now I sit around and I just carve trees with the sharp knives and mallets. It's really really nice to have gone backwards. But my experience is still there. Like I still have this innate urge to make things that are realistic or coming from the body. So a lot of my work is about the body with faces and hands and things like that.
That's fascinating. I love that.
I also really love that this project clearly seemed to plant seeds in you guys that have very much sprouted and who you would become. Like David, for example, your work first crossed our desk when you edited Ben Percy's incredible short film last year. So I love that you're still editing, and obviously you've graduated from the VCR to VCR days, and that this is still a part of who you are in some way. It's terrific.
Yes, sir. Yeah, that's been a real blessing the last few years to connect with Ben. We both live in this same small town in Minnesota, and I knew of him for a long time. And I was just like, I should be friends with that guy. But I'm like, based on what? Other than like he seems cool. But,
I like comic books too.
Yeah. So, so we worked together on short films, and we did one called Worm. Vote for Worm, where I
just got submitted. And you know what? Yes. Fuck it. I'll say it. It's an accepted film. By the time that Ben doesn't know that yet, you know that before him. So feel free to lord that information over him if you need to.
I can't wait. But that one was really fun. Like it went back to kind of the punk rock days of
it's awesome. It's
just using
so much
whatever
fun.
you had. So I got to do everything on. I mean, he writes and directs them, but like I got to shoot that one and edit it and sound design, all that kind of stuff. And then my day job is since like 2008 or so, I've worked full time as a video producer for like colleges and universities, and that's been it's close to as good a gig as the Cable Access Center once was, except for now. Because when the Cable Access Center, like if there was nobody booking the time, I could just do my own thing. Whereas now that doesn't really happen. But I do still then have access to like all of the gear and everything to kind of work on my own things. And then it's also nice because so much of my work over the years between this starting off these personal documentaries, and there's been plenty of others. And this one I've been making for 10 years, focused on my solo music. It's just a lot of me. My day job is telling other people's stories, usually like students or faculty or alumni of all kinds, and really just made countless documentary shorts in that capacity, which has been really rewarding and then strengthens my personal work as well. But that stuff's pretty nourishing.
Well, this has been incredible. Unless you guys have something to add, I think that's a great stopping place. You can find our double feature presentation of Inertia, the remaking The Crow, and James O'Barr's The Crow as a single piece on the eventive side of our festival this year, the virtual side. And David has so kindly provided nice intros for both of those, very well done intros that provide some important context before getting into those. And it's just, I'm just so proud and happy to be able to present these works of just incredible creativity and like what young ingenuity can produce with that.
One of the things we love to celebrate the most, to spiral off of what Dustin's saying, is like just the joy of being a fan, like the joy of being passionate and loving something. And obviously we're in a world now where, fandom looks a lot different and it's become a lot more toxic. So to see something done with this much love and earnestness just really like pulls on our heartstrings too. So again, we have to, to just, give you a giant thank you for spending years of your lives finishing this project. It really does mean a lot to us to share, like Dustin's saying. So,
oh man,
yeah, I'd like to thank you guys, because for me it was something that happened and went away, and then for Dave though it never went away, and it's been really great that in the last couple of years that we did something that's wasn't just something that we did. It's actually something that has this sort of echo and reverberation to it. And then you come back to it now at this age, much older age, and can really be, in a way, proud of it. And so it's nice to hear you guys' response, to think that this time was definitely not wasted, but it's really, really special to hear this effect that it's had on not just you two, but all these people on these forums and these YouTube comments and things like that. I still don't believe it and understand it. So it's.
I think we all also just need a palate cleanser from The Crow 2024.
And by the way, they tried to do that Joy Division needle drop thing too, and when they did it, it didn't work. I'm sorry, little Gary Newman action just didn't feel right. So.
Well, I think if anyone is not in a position to throw shade at someone remaking the movie, it's me. But
let me do it for you. Fuck that movie. Yeah. So.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for spotlighting these old works, and just I got to be there in person last year with 13th Night, and you guys do such a magnificent job of making filmmakers feel welcome and creating these events that feel exciting to attend. And yeah, just thanks so much for the opportunity to share these things.
Likewise, sir. It's an honor, truly.